of us, we start having problems. And indeed, that is the truth. We are having all sorts of health issues. And certainly what's happening with our children is incredible. Now, let's go back to what you said about heavy metal or toxicity, specifically mercury.
Yeah, well, I had a lot of cavities growing up, and I had 15 amalgam fillings in my mouth. I did not know that I had elevated levels of mercury in my body, and it had to be coming from my fillings because I don't eat fish. And that's another topic, too.
And that's another source, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pregnant women should not eat fish, especially tuna and sushi, shark. But anyway, so I was already toxic. And besides the mercury, I was also carrying DDT in my body. It's amazing my kids did as well as they did, considering all the toxins I was carrying. But I'm not unusual. There are many of us out there that have amalgam fillings. And ideally, if you do have amalgam fillings, they should be removed before you become pregnant. Because every time you chew or drink hot fluids, vapors from the mercury are released into your body. And it goes right to the fetus's brain. So that's something that people need to be aware of.
I feel for these young women ready to have children, and one, they're infertile for all sorts of reasons,
Yes.
and then two, now the burden that they bear, wondering if they're going to have a healthy child or not, because this environmental damage now goes generation to generation. And we think, of the foods that we have ingested without the proper nutrients, the toxins that we have been exposed to, especially household solvents and bleaches and
Yes.
and Mr. Clean and sprays and aerosols and everything that we were told to, we needed to keep the germs out of our house.
Yeah.
It wasn't the germs that was going to get us; it was the toxins and all these chemicals that are going to get us.
And also the antibacterial soap that they're recommending is made with pesticides.
Brilliant.
Yes. So antibacterial soap.
Holy
is
hormones,
healthy for
honey.
us. Yeah.
Oh, God.
And speaking of hormones, it disrupts your hormones.
And it disrupts your hormones. Well, there's the tie-in for the show. Author Deborah Merlin's here tonight. Victory Over ADHD, a holistic approach for helping children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Some parents may have a shock when they're enrolling their children in school and finding out that their child may be placed in a special needs program. The child does not perform as well. Homework is arduous. There's tears, there's tantrums, there's frustration within the whole family. It is going to disrupt the whole family.
Yeah. I'd love to give some tips for parents that they can do immediately for their children if they do start to hear that label. First off, breakfast is really important. And I was the poster mother who was doing everything wrong when my kids were little. They were very picky eaters, and I was determined, to get them to eat something. So I ended up feeding them Fruit Loops. Now, Fruit Loops have no nutritional value whatsoever. They're made with, they have many artificial food coloring in it, in sugar, in wheat. These are the foods that children who are prone or susceptible to neurological disorders are really sensitive to. And most people don't know that most artificial food colorings contain trace amounts of arsenic, lead, and mercury. So, and even though they're small amounts, there is no safe amount of these heavy metals.
All right, so those school cupcakes are out.
Yes. Forget Jell-O.
Yep.
Tuna fish has mercury. So you really want to be aware of that. And another thing, too, if your child has frequent ear infections, which mine did, stop the dairy. Because both my children had constant ear infections and respiratory infections, and their pediatricians never stopped to talk about what could be possibly causing their infections. They just kept on prescribing antibiotics.
Right.
And it turned out that the antibiotics were being prescribed for a dairy allergy. Not too bright. So then when you're taking antibiotics, then there's an overgrowth of yeast in your body.
Yep.
Which Candida also leads to symptoms of attention deficit disorder.
Really?
Yes.
So that's yeast in breads and yeast in cookies, yeast in
sugar,
cakes.
anything sugar, and antibiotics.
And antibiotics. In fact, there was an Italian oncologist who was going viral around the internet, stating that when he does cancer surgeries, that he has noticed yeast and fungus on cancerous organs, cancerous cells. So the yeast, and actually it's called cellular inflammation. That's a new term that's cropping up into our vocabulary. I think I must have read that in your book last night as a something else to watch out for. But it's more acid in the diet than it is
alkaline.
Alkaline. What is alkaline? Fresh fruits and vegetables. No Fruit Loops in that, people.
No.
Versus all your acidic foods, which is your soda and all your processed foods and frozen foods and dead foods.
Yes.
I mean, and this is what I've said for years, too. We're live people. We got to eat live foods.
Absolutely.
What's left to eat?
What's left to eat? Get that apple. Yeah, what's left to eat?
Right. And another great tip, too, if your child is coming down with frequent infections or have behavior issues, look at what the staple of the diet is and what they're craving the most. That is your clue.
All right, so before we would take the child to a therapist or to a doctor who would write out a script and say, oh, anxiety, oh, over hyperactivity, take this, and what we know now, this is tied back to diet.
Yes.
It's all tied back to diet.
Yeah, and diet and environmental toxins.
And diet and environmental toxins. I heard a fascinating show just last Tuesday on the Pioneers program here in KRFC, and I love that show. But they were talking about green chemistry, and now there are institutes popping up that are looking at getting the toxins out of all of the manufactured products, which is going to take years,
yes.
And replacing them with organic compounds versus inorganic compounds. That makes sense. That ain't going to happen in our lifetime. And so we have to be diligent on the home front. And I think, part of me is overwhelmed, and concerned. But the other part of me is like, all right, this is where women's roles, women's values, women's intuition comes back to the forefront of our consciousness.
Yes.
And women's contributions to the health of the family, along with a male partner, no doubt. There are many single parents out there. However, these are things that our grandmothers did, some of our mothers did, our great-grandmothers did, cooking with whole foods.
Yes.
And getting back to the basics.
Yeah, and do not eat genetically engineered, modified food, because it's not real food too. It's very inferior to organic food. So it is really critical. And another thing too, if a child, some of the children who exhibit ADD symptoms also may have a violent temper or constant irritability. I would recommend that the child gets a QEEG, which is a brain scan to measure the brain activity in the brain, because 1/3 of children who have ADD, ADHD, autism are actually having brain seizures.
That's amazing.
Yeah, very common. So it's critical. I mean, especially if you were considering to put your child on a stimulant, you don't want to put a child who's having brain seizures on a stimulant.
No.
No, that would not be good.
No, I mean, common sense alone would tell you that, but unless you have a brain scan, you don't know that these seizures are going on. Right. But certainly that makes a lot of sense, and especially with children.